I'm Kelly Quiney, and this is Stepping Off the Path. Stories of women who stopped living by everyone else's rules and chose themselves instead. Because when your situation becomes intolerable, change isn't just an option, it's the only way forward. These are the stories of what happens next, when women finally decide they've had enough and choose a different way forward. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the start of everything. A note about this episode. It contains discussions of domestic violence, coercive control, stalking, trauma, and the emotional and financial impacts of leaving an abusive relationship. Please listen with care, take breaks if you need to, and only continue if you feel resourced to do so. This conversation is shared for storytelling and educational purposes. It is not therapy, legal advice, or a substitute for professional support. If you or someone you know is experiencing harm or feels unsafe, please reach out to a qualified support service, a trusted professional, or the emergency services in your local area. You're not alone, and help is available. Welcome back to Stepping Off the Path. Today's conversation is one that stays with you long after you've heard it. I'm speaking with Lisa Tregenza, a mindset and movement coach whose story is one of extraordinary courage, resilience, and reclamation. Lisa walks us through what it really takes to leave an abusive relationship, not just the simplified, just leave version, but the truth, the cost, the grief, the time lost, the unraveling, and the moment she found herself with nothing but a yoga mat, her breath, and the question, how am I going to do this? We talk about healing through somatic work, the power of tiny decisions, the strength required to keep showing up, and what it means to take your power back after everything has been taken from you. This episode is raw, honest, and full of hope. If you're in that in-between place, unsure how to take the next step, I hope Lisa's story reminds you that you're not alone and you're not broken. Let's dive in. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest, Lisa Tregenza. Lisa is widely known as a mindset and movement coach who supports people to move through trauma, reconnect with themselves, and ultimately thrive. She draws on a powerful combination of professional expertise and deep lived experience, bringing a level of compassion, wisdom, and embodiment that can only come from someone who has truly walked the path themselves. She's also the founder of In Tune Yoga, where she offers both in-person sessions and daily online classes, making her work accessible to a global community. Lisa's background spans corporate and marketing roles, and when her children were young, she even created a successful music group for kids, proving she's not only multi-passionate, but can build meaningful things in any season of life. Today, she is a sought-after international speaker, retreat facilitator, and workshop leader, supporting people around the world to heal, grow, and reimagine what's possible. Lisa, I'm so honored to have you here. Welcome to Stepping Off the Path.
Thank you. Wow, gosh, it feels so amazing to hear that. I'm just, at the stage where one of my children has just literally finished school, and I'm going, yeah, wow. And, hearing that is one thing, but acknowledging that the most important thing through all of that was that I was a mum, and and they were always the priority. So, hearing that is really just a reminder of my passions that I live and embody that have grown into businesses. And my kids really are they're my priority. And wow. Thanks.
And your kids, right? They're in their teens now. Is that right?
Yes. My daughter is 18 and she has literally just finished school, and just found out yesterday that she's going to be receiving an award at the final prize giving, which is
Wow.
significant,
Yeah.
um, and has held numerous leadership roles at the school this year. So, beautifully well-rounded in what she does, and already
Mm.
got a job to secure until she gets into her career, which she knows what she wants to do. So, yeah,
Wow.
she's amazing. And they're my twins. So, I had, 3
Yeah.
very close in age, so 3 within 20 months. So my boys are
Oh,
nearly 17, and they're thriving at school, and I've just got 1 more year to go, and they're doing amazing as well. So, and at the end of the day, I think, gosh, it's lovely to hear what we're doing in the world in terms of supporting women and supporting the community and creating businesses, and looking at wellness and how we're showing up and how others are showing up. Um, the thing that's most important to me is, how are we empowering our next generation? So, as parents, are we creating wonderful humans that go on shining the light and being leaders in their own selves? So yeah, just want to highlight
wow.
the importance of being a mum.
And I think there's a lot of reasons there to be proud. And you touched on a few things, which I think you do anyway. But to start with, could you share a little bit about the work that you do now and the people that you support and work with?
Mm, mm. So my focus really is on women, and it is focused around, well, there's different aspects. There's obviously the movement aspect, which is yoga, and from that, what I have found is a beautiful modality with yoga therapy,
Hmm.
and this is where we know the body keeps score. So we know that by connecting in with movement, we can unlock, we can release, we can move through a lot of pain or trauma that is stored in the body. So that combined with coaching, life coaching, menopause coaching, um, and business coaching, all of that combined is where I support women to really heal through their journey. So their own, personal healing. Um,
Hmm.
so releasing trauma, um, and utilizing somatic practices in that way, the full mind body connection. And it's one thing to sort of move through or do some healing work, but we want to get to an empowered and embodied place. And
Mm.
really my focus to get to that point where we're using the movement and mindset combination. Yeah, for these women to feel empowered, to feel connected to their soul purpose, um to be the best version of themselves that they can be, and walk alongside their trauma. It doesn't go away. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever these experiences are, we are still able to exist with them, whether that's grief, whether it's with the anxiety that sits with them now, being able to walk with that on their journey forward, and to step into their full power and in a beautiful embodied feminine way.
Mm-mm. And you explain that so beautifully because we read about and we know that so much is stored in the body that we may not even be aware of. And you'd say that your work it really grew out of your own experience and what you have been through in your life and your experience of starting over. So, what, or if you wouldn't mind sharing, what was happening for you when that came up in your life? Where did that grow from for you?
Hmm. Yeah, well, yoga itself has always been a part of my life. I was introduced to that when I was the sales and marketing manager of a gym in my 20s. And that's where that connection came. And I think it's really important because that became my savior in a way, that I could
Mm,
always connect in with my breath and move. So when I um yeah, I mean, there was a point where I was in an unhealthy,
mhm,
relationship, and, by that, there's family harm, there's domestic violence, which is a big term for a lot of things. And I think really important to recognize that that doesn't look the same for everyone. So that can be manipulative behavior, it can be coercion, it can be controlling the finances, it
Mhm.
can be controlling what you do. It can be, there's so many aspects as well as physical
Yeah.
aspects, as well. So I think it's really important to know the spectrum of that, because um, sometimes, because of the nature of control, it doesn't necessarily stop when you step away from that physically, when you step away from that relationship.
Right.
It's one thing to move out of that situation. It's another thing to then have the strength to carry on
Mm.
showing up when you have children, when you have commitments, and when, you know, for me, I was being stalked outside of my relationship, and
Right.
the abuse continued and the control continued in multiple ways. So it's super challenging to find the inner strength, step away from that, and rebuild.
Yeah.
And this is where yoga for me really was my thing, because I was at a point where I didn't have a house, I didn't have, money for the kids. Like, there was lots of reasons for that in terms of the financial control and
Mm.
locking up of assets. And I just remember one day, just I had my yoga mat, and it was just, here's my mat, and this was my safe space. And I wasn't at a point where I could pay for therapy or counseling or, get any advice. It was just my mat and my breath. And
Mm.
there's a breakdown in the sense of tears and, man, how am I going to do this? And just all the things. But then it was also a breakthrough in the sense that, wow, even when I've got all these tears, I can still move my body. I can still release, like pigeon pose. Amazing. Like,
Wow.
all these things that would just hold me, and I needed to
Mm.
be held. And then I went, okay, great. And now I'm going to pick the kids up in 15 minutes. How am I going to bring myself back together so that I can actually show up and still be a mum that is able to function? I'm not putting a mask of, hey, everything's great, kids. And
Yeah.
no worries. It was like, yeah, things are challenging. However, I've still got to be together enough to cook dinner and be real and hold conversations. So when I'd been crying and just unknown how to get through this. So,
Mm.
that's when I really connected in with my affirmations, and it was challenging, like, I didn't actually believe them at the time.
Mm.
Say them, and I knew that it was the right thing to do, but I wasn't feeling it, and it took time for the movement and the mindset to come together. So the movement and the mantra, the affirmations coming together, releasing energy,
Mm.
pain, trauma, so that it could actually have space for the affirmations to land, for the new wiring of the mind to
Mm.
land, and then to actually embody that, power poses and strength. So um, that was the pivot point in terms of really finding a practice for me that I created
Mm.
from a place of pain. And that's, what really then turned into In Tune Yoga Daily, which is these 20-minute classes that combine movement and mindset, so movement and affirmations.
Mhm. Mm.
And that is the release on one level, and also the empowerment.
Yeah.
And, that's what I love, and that's what I found help for me.
Mm. It sounds when you were explaining that, I felt this a deep feeling of nourishment. You're there, all you've got is your mat. That's it. Like you say, you don't have money. And I also just want to acknowledge you sharing what you went through. I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to speak about that. And also to give voice to the broad spectrum of domestic violence, because we have an idea that domestic violence is a certain way. I think there's a lot of stereotypes about this, the type of people we think are perpetrators and the people at the hands of those perpetrators. And I'm really curious. You said you got the courage to leave. and there was more going on, you know, could you explain a bit more maybe about what the cost was to you to actually leave? Because we hear it all the time, just leave. But what was the cost to you to actually do that?
Yeah. Well, the cost was financial.
Mm,
And yeah, we were in our home, and then I
mhm.
didn't have a home.
Right.
So, it was real. Uh, and that's huge because you're literally starting again from ground
Mm,
zero, and a lot of that was premeditated in terms of things that I didn't have full awareness of what was going on in the background and how things were protected for the other party,
right.
not me. Uh, and then things get locked, so it's really hard. So then you can't access things, and of course, then you don't have funds for lawyers. So it's a really tough situation, and you're hugely emotional. Your battery's so drained. You're at
Mm,
zero because of the gaslighting, because of the the sleepless nights. I mean, that in itself, not having support for lack of sleep. My daughter didn't sleep through the night until she was 6, and so the
yeah,
sleep deprivation was huge,
yeah.
and not having health access, enough health access, that was
Mm,
huge, to support me, which came to control of money, which is crazy when I was a successful corporate person, before that, and had full access to all my funds, and suddenly stay-at-home mum, hmm, this is super challenging. So, leaving, or, stepping out of that, moving into that next phase, the challenges were, what was being said even about me,
mm,
which then, reduced friendships, which, actually
yeah,
took people away from my field rather than bringing them into support because they didn't know what to believe. and
mm,
and yeah, so there's the cost of friendships. There was the time lost.
mm,
I was always having to fight for just to hold status quo, in terms of time with the children, or, going through family court. I mean, 7 years in family court.
wow.
Yeah, that I self-represented.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. That's a long time, and you're in fight energy. So what was the cost of that? My nervous system just destroyed, always on edge. I mean, I was being stalked. So, I was, online and in person. And
Mm,
so you're just always on edge. So your
yeah.
nervous system, your cortisol is just through the roof. Yeah, the time. I think the time cost is huge because there
Mm,
was so much time just put into just trying to keep status quo, not even being able to build, or um yeah, rebuild, or just move on. My business was affected. My business was broken into.
mm,
Um, and yeah, there was just so much that happened in that sense. And my email account got broken into. And so that, there were emails that were sent, and that affected friendships and business relationships. So that was really major in terms of a cost. I haven't been asked this question before. It's a really good question. It was huge. And I think, there's grief from the relationship not working as you had hoped. There's
yeah.
grief of it not being, or them not being who you thought they were. There's kind of this shame, there's embarrassment, like, I was
Mhm,
that intelligent woman. How did I not see this? How did I not see the, what I now know as red flags? Um, but there's a very common pattern, and a very, we see now that there's common traits of this. So, I didn't know anything about that then. I didn't know anything about that. And that's why, partly why I'm so focused on supporting my children to be aware of their feelings, to be aware of behavior and how someone shows up, and trust them, believe them, when they actually show you who the
mhm,
first time. Like, okay. and empowering them so that they don't get stuck, so they don't feel like they don't have a choice.
You know what? I think you've explained so beautifully there, and it was going to be one of my questions. I'll say what it was. That this unhelpful narrative around, well, she should just leave. I'm wondering, in your experience, what is misunderstood about that? But to my hearing, you've explained that really, really clearly.
I think there's a lot misunderstood, and I mean, it's hard enough for you in it to understand it, let alone
Mm,
for an outsider who's looking at this beautiful home in this beautiful suburb with a partner who has a great job and
mm,
always looks good when you're out in public, to go, What's wrong? Can't be that bad."
yeah.
Um, and yeah, and even within my family, even that being said, and it wasn't until they experienced the wrath of it firsthand, which came, a few years later, they went, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "That was once, and now you believe me." So, it's really challenging, and even just saying that, I remember, gosh, I mean, this was a crazy time to be in the law courts, but in Christchurch, the day, sadly, of the mosque shooting,
Mm,
and I was in there filing another form, as I was in there quite often doing, and I needed it to be signed off by one of the people. I'd finished writing my affidavit and was waiting for someone to come in and witness that, and the whole place got shut down.
mm,
So I just wanted to get out of there. I really just wanted to file this and get out. No, I was locked in. Somehow I got pushed through because of just the way it all happened. And so then at one point I just burst into tears because I couldn't get hold of my kids, and I just happened to be next to someone who was a victim support person. And I just, briefly explained why I was there. I said, "Oh no, I'm not staff. This is why I was here, and this is the affidavit." And she was like, "Oh, wow, okay, this is a lot." And then she said, "I believe you."
oh, wow.
And even now I get goosebumps. And it was the first time that someone had just, that was it. Because you're having to tell your story so many times
Mm,
to, lawyer for child or different, forms you're filling in. So it's like it's re-traumatizing every time you're telling your story. And you don't want to have to go back into it, but you
mm,
do. And then you're having to justify it, and then you're having to prove it, and then you're being judged by a judge,
mhm,
being judged. And so, yeah, just those simple words of "I believe you" is huge.
mm,
Um, yeah. So if someone is going through this, or you're going through this, listening to this, if something feels off, it probably is. It's your birthright to be loved and to feel love for yourself. And
mm.
so, if someone else is not showing that same level of respect, it's not okay.
No.
And so, you just don't need to justify it, or if it's not right for you and it's not feeling right for you, then it's not right. And
Mhm,
that's enough. And believe yourself, and some people will believe you, some people won't. And just make that choice to move on, move through. It's never going to be easy. And that's why I think, it's so important to understand what I call now orange flags. Because, we talk about the red flags and they seem pretty obvious,
mm,
and they're not always when you've got rose tinted glasses on, when you're,
no.
falling in love.
Mm,
But orange flags are really important. They're the ones in between, that there's probably a lot of them.
mhm,
And I remember lots of times when my gut would just feel a bit off. It would just be like, or I'd shrink nearly if something was said, or it was kind of I'd have been a public put down or something like that.
mm.
And maybe it's a red flag now, I don't know. But I would, that's a orange flag. And when there's lots of them, where you're just shrinking, where you're contracting, where your body is talking to you, and this is the somatic practice, listening to your body and being so connected to your body that that's not
Mhm,
a place you want to be. You want to be open-hearted and supported and loved and nourished and cherished. And there's a huge difference. And when you find that and when you're in that, it's like, wow, you know,
Mhm.
this is possible. And it is possible. Yeah.
Why do you think we don't listen to the little voice? And I haven't. I say that as a person who has ignored the little voice, but I wonder what you think.
Mm. Oh, look, I think as women in particular, we have grown up with the be a good girl complex, be a
Oh
good girl,
yeah. Oh yeah.
right? And so, we're naturally nurturers, we're naturally givers, and so, when we give, sometimes we give too much. We then go into people pleasing. So we're not
Mhm.
actually giving from an authentic place. We're giving to please, to placate, to minimize conflict, to calm, keep the situation calm, which is not healthy. And
No.
so if we as children are taught that, we as teenagers, as adults, that's how we show up in our relationships. So again, which is why, for me having a daughter first, it was like, you are going to be one empowered girl. You are going to be so
Yes.
yeah, because I wasn't taught that. We
Yeah.
weren't taught that. And I had a beautiful childhood. And
Mhm.
so I didn't have any adversities where I had to really toughen up my skin. So I went
Mm.
into the world, beautifully naive. um, so yeah, my kids have had to go through, a challenging separation with, parents in separate homes and, all that comes with that. However, they've always been held, they've always been listened to and seen for who they are. And,
Mhm.
whenever they've raised a concern, it's heard, it's listened, and we have a strategy on that. Or if there's been a friendship where it wasn't honoring, I can remember a situation where with my daughter that one of her friends at the time, she thought she was stealing from her. And it did turn out she was. And so we addressed that. But instead of just going, we'll just push it under the rug. We won't
Mhm.
do that. She dealt with it. She wanted to deal with it. She wanted to address it. And, then that uncovered some things for the girl to address and kind of go, well, this is why I'm doing it. And so then she had to talk to her mum. And it was like, that was so empowering. I mean, it did mean that the friendship didn't continue because their values, my daughter realized that the values didn't align. Well, great realization at a young age, but
Yeah.
the courage to have that conversation and to have value to go, this is not okay. I'm not standing for this.
Mm.
So, this is where it's so important that we are empowering our next generation. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm so passionate about conscious parenting, and we can do all these things in the business world, but how are we serving? How are we showing up for? How are we supporting our humans that
Yeah.
we are growing? And that's why through all of this, I've now been able to give my children tools that
Yeah.
mean that they are showing up as leaders and they're having courageous conversations and they're supporting their friends. They're taking their friends to the counselor if they know that there's an issue. And so they're supporting them through that or going, hey, maybe this is something you do want to talk about. So it's like, wow, that's great because that means they're going to be healthy adults that will still have stuff, deal with stuff will happen, but at least they've got some tools to actually work through some of this.
I just I'm in awe of that. And when you were explaining that story about your daughter, I'm sat here going, I'm 48 and I could really do with learning those skills to hear, that she's achieved that. And then there was something you said earlier, and I think it is really important to acknowledge it. We here in New Zealand about how much the family courts need reform, and to hear you say that you self represented for 7 years, I didn't want to let that go without acknowledging how massive that is.
Huge.
Absolutely huge. I'm in awe of your ability to do that. I just wanted to acknowledge that. But you've explained your journey up to that point so well, and also explaining you had your yoga mat and that was your thing. So I'm curious, what were those parts of the first small steps on your own healing journey? Because that whole bit, you're focused on the kids, right?
Mm.
Kids, okay, I've got to get through this. Okay, you could do some yoga. But was there a point where you were finally able to beginning some of your own healing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, I did have one amazing coach that I literally spent my last $1,000 on. It was like I did have some funds and that was being used to support my business, which sadly then got broken into is the easiest way to describe it. And so
Mhm.
that put on hold. And I was like, wow, you know, my yoga mat is helping and that's doing great things, my yoga practice and meditation. However, I just need to talk to someone because
Mhm.
we need that as well, and someone impartial. And that is where I did reach out to an amazing coach and worked with her, and that really did start the healing journey and helped me understand that, right, yes, there's the movement and the mindset, and there's also the understanding what's going on, you know, just the cognitive thoughts, the limiting beliefs, and starting to talk about things that I had never really heard of, which was cutting cords, cutting energetic cords. I'm like, I've never heard of that before, whereas now that totally makes sense to me, and it's something that,
Can I just ask what that means
yeah.
before? Yeah, but I'd love you to explain, yeah, what that
Yeah,
means.
sure. So this coach is an intuitive coach that I was working with, and she did have a strong focus on meditation as well, and so it was helping me work through, you know, the situation, and was hearing me. Not many people were actually hearing what's going on, giving me some support. And so cutting cords is like when we think of our energy field. And when we move away from someone, we are not able to be physically touched, if that makes sense. Yet they have these energetic hooks that
Yes.
are still connected to us. And for example, if you have children and you're going through a family court, well, there's a huge energetic hook control.
Mhm. Mm.
Uh, but that's a very specific one, but it could just be that, an energetic hook could be they've said something that has minimized you, that's, it's been a criticism or it stopped you, and that hook is still there. And so but it's also still connected to that person. It's nearly as if, you could be trying to prove something to prove to that person,
Yep.
rather than actually just, you're growing. And so these hooks need to be cut
Mm.
so that you're not energetically connected to that person or being controlled by that person without even realizing that you are, consciously.
Yeah.
So it really started bringing my awareness into our own energy, how we show up, how someone else is showing up in our field, if we're giving them time in
Mm.
our mind space just by thinking about them, or being angry towards them, which ultimately is anger within ourselves. So
Mm.
really got me starting to understand some of these concepts. So and then I just grew from there. It was like yoga teacher training, yoga
Mm.
therapy training, training with Gabor Mate on trauma.
Wow.
Like that's my passion, is
Yeah.
understanding trauma on so many different levels. And that is, I do work with a lot of women in that field, some who may have experienced horrific childhood trauma. There could be sexual assault, there could be domestic violence, there could be there's so many different levels of trauma. We can have the big trauma, big T and the
Yeah.
little t. So it really ranges, but anything that gets stored in the body and is an experience that you haven't been able to process or has not felt healthy for you, can be trauma. So
Mm.
that is an area that I'm passionate about. And I
Yeah.
was just thinking, you're talking about, oh, I'd love to have these skills. Well, part of sharing into yoga daily, the movement and mindset, I would find I'd be talking about certain topics at the beginning of the class. And then I went, well, it's probably worthwhile to actually embrace this and expand on this. So now I have the in circle, which is covering these topics. Like,
Mm.
how do we deal with guilt? How do we deal with anger? How do we approach a difficult situation? How do we
Mhm.
have these courageous conversations? So, yeah, and it's, get beautiful feedback from the ladies that are doing this, and just showing up differently in daily life. Which I
Mhm.
received an email yesterday. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And she explained the situation, how did it help? So, that's what it's all about, really. How we're showing up now with our learning, with our growth.
It strikes me like when you were sharing, there's so much joy in seeing you and hearing you, the way your voice sounds and your face lighting up. And when you were talking about energy and cutting the energy, we hear empowerment a lot, but I thought I really had this feeling of taking the power back. You get to choose, and you took that power back, and that felt like empowering in the truest sense of the word, right? Not passive empowerment, but this I get to decide how this goes. And I can only imagine for somebody who lost a lot of control, really, business, emails, relationships with friends, being stalked online, how, how like even lightning that must have felt to be able to have that after that long journey.
Yeah, huge, huge, and it doesn't happen overnight.
No. No.
I think that's where it's really important for, if there's a lady listening to this right now and she's thinking, "Wow, I wanna get there, and I'm not there yet. What am I doing wrong?" You're not doing anything wrong. It's just taking the steps and being
Mhm.
patient, and also knowing that your healing journey doesn't need to be a continual work in progress. Sometimes there'll be
Mhm.
a growth phase, or you're really working on something or working through, you found the right coach. It's so important to find the right coach or mentor or counselor, whatever modality works for you, to find the
Mhm.
right one. And if they're not right, to say, this is not working for me.
Yeah.
It's nothing personal, and step away from it, so you've got space to find the right person. And any
Mhm.
great coach will make sure that there is an alignment of who they're working with and the way they work, so that you
Absolutely.
are getting results, and
Mm.
and so that you are empowered to move beyond that coach, because
Mm.
you don't want to be tied to a situation, because it's just losing control again. So,
Yeah.
the whole aspect of working with a coach is so you don't have to,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
And learning that no is a complete sentence.
Yes, yes, yes. No, yes, it is.
And I wonder, I love that you talked about, it doesn't happen overnight. And I just wonder, on the harder days, what helped you to keep going?
Yeah, look, presence, gratitude,
Mm.
breath, simple. It's just simple. I used to write. I had journals and I would write all the time. So if I was feeling like a surge of emotion coming up, I'd write it down and I'd let it come up and get it out, and then
Mhm.
I'd carry on. You know, Bottling stuff up does not help. It's just going to delay. So yeah, it's really challenged me. I didn't have much time for me, but I would make sure that at some point I'd be able to connect in with my breath. I would
Mhm.
be able to do my yoga practice. So making a commitment to yourself,
Yeah.
even if it's 5 minutes a day, that's what you need. You need 5 minutes minimum to
Mhm.
just be with yourself, to breathe slowly, to regulate the nervous system. Those were my not negotiables. Yeah, the breath, yoga, movement, fresh
Mhm.
air. like getting
Yeah.
outside, fresh air, grounding. I always walk on the beach barefoot or the park barefoot. And journaling's really a big one because it does mean you can write stuff down and then move on. It doesn't fix it, but if you are working with a coach or if you then have an hour to just look over it and kind of go, wow, there's a bit of a theme here, but it's a different theme to a year ago, and that's
Mm, yeah.
so, yeah, those would be my key things that
Mm,
really helped
yeah.
me.
And you've turned your experience into such powerful work. And how has it been to share your story more publicly?
Wow, yeah, that's challenging.
Mm.
Challenging because there was still a connection between myself and the previous relationship,
Yeah.
children. And those children are then covered in terms of family court. So there was a point there where anything I put on socials was being turned against me or put as evidence and made into a story that wasn't even a thing. And
Oh.
it didn't even mention their name. It wasn't even about them. And they would be created as evidence, which I would then have to defend, which wasn't even a thing. So you can imagine my voice in terms of sharing my story has
Mm.
been minimized until now. And
Right.
now they're older, they're outside of family court, and they do have an understanding. Um, I was very aware of them, the children, not being involved in the adult situation.
Yeah.
Sadly, you know, that's my 50% of it. I can
Mm.
manage what I say. There's another party. So, you know, they're at a point where they can understand. They know to a certain level what happened. And, in fairness, they're still making sense of some of that because
Yep.
it's not the same story. So, yeah, I was very conscious of not sharing anything of this
Mhm.
publicly. And I wasn't ready to. It was still raw. When you are still in it, when you're still going through family court, when you're still struggling financially, when you are rebuilding, you know, I didn't feel that my story, I was still in it.
Yeah.
So, my story is now that I have got through that. I have
Mm.
worked through that. I have also done my own healing, done some training, worked with clients. So I'm now at a point where I can talk to it without the pain and the trauma coming up to the surface
Yep.
like it was. Mm.
Yeah. Does it ever feel like you have to, like you said, the kids are aware? Is that ever a thought in your mind, or have you had more conversations with them now that you're starting to share more publicly?
Um, I think the great thing is it's been a very gradual thing that I'll talk to things as they come up. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, they just have an awareness. They have an awareness, and so I do check in. I let them know that I'm being interviewed or doing these different things.
Mhm.
And that's fully supportive. I mean, it's like when I was speaking, asked to speak in Paris at the beginning of the year for a women's empowerment event. Super proud of me. And so, they know what I've been through and they know where I'm at now. And so that they've walked with me on this journey as well.
Mm, mm, mm. And even then, you referencing that was brilliant because I think back to, okay, there's Lisa, you get the courage to leave. And you said it very simply. I had a house. I didn't have a house. And what a journey. And then hearing you say being asked to speak at the international event in Paris, could you imagine then, like here you are?
No, and I think that's so important to even just highlight that because again, for the woman that's listening that is on a yoga mat crying, or on the
Mm,
floor, where it's just at that point of there's nothing left, that feeling broken, horrible.
Mm.
there is something that's going to come from this. I didn't know that in that moment. I wasn't thinking about Paris speaking, you know, at an event, going, wow, I'm going to have this amazing story to tell. No. However, life is not linear. It is a whole lot of experiences. And when we have the courage to just keep showing up and keep looking for that little moment of hope or light or gratitude. Gratitude was huge for me, actually. It was, what am
Mm.
I grateful for? So there were days where it came down to I'm grateful for my breath.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I can breathe. And so, it is tough. And I think it's really important to know that you will get through it. And it's just like get through the next minute, get through the next 10 minutes, get through the hour, calm the nervous system, and then see if your brain then comes back online, the cognitive brain comes back online, so you can think and find a solution or take the next step. And it is all small steps that get you there. And so often you will not see the ladder. You do not know what that step is.
Yeah.
It's like taking a step on a glass staircase that you can't see. You've just got to take the step and trust. And there's so many
Mm.
times I've done that, and so many times, even buying my home when I was able to, and there was just this huge leap of faith, but it was just so focused. There was no room for doubt or that it wouldn't work, and and it did work because I just focused on making it work. So yeah, just the mindset, the focus, the take the small steps, trust
Mm.
that there will be
Yeah.
something else.
And I think I've heard you speak to this before, but also really important that I think you've said what are the little decisions I can make today? Because added up, they will have a big impact, right? It's like you're in a ship and you turn it 2 degrees and you end up way off. I think that's a really important thing that you've shared before as well.
So important, yeah.
Mm.
Making the choices on what you can choose, supporting yourself where you can. So, you know, like I've talked about, choosing, because it is a choice to show up and practice yoga each day.
Mm.
Choosing that, choosing to go for a walk, choosing to be kind to yourself, choosing compassion for yourself, giving yourself grace. All these things are little choices that
Mhm.
that add up, and it really does change the trajectory of your life, those little micro choices.
Mm. Mm. So how do you think what you went through, and I think you've talked to some of it, but how it shaped the way that you support the women that you work with today?
Mm. Well, it was interesting, like, part of my journey, I have seen a couple of counselors along the way, and psychologists, and what struck me with that was how clinical it can be.
Yep.
Uh and not necessarily giving you practical tools, and it was still very much in my head. So the talking was very much, we're talking, but I'm still feeling
Mhm.
discombobulated. Having gone through this and other trauma, there is other trauma in my adult life. I know what that feels like, to feel at that place where you've experienced something, you didn't have someone that held you post the trauma
Mm.
for whatever reason. You couldn't tell them, you didn't know how to tell them, you didn't even know what had happened, like whatever that is. So you didn't have someone post trauma to hold you, to talk to you. And then you're trying to work through this, but you don't know who to ask, where to get help, how to find someone that is aligned to you. So I totally understand that. So I think when someone reaches out, I understand how scary that can be.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to have a conversation with the client right at the beginning, and just find out where they're at and make sure you're aligned. And there's no obligation to go forward, because if they don't feel that this is the right fit, then that's okay. They're not going to get the best results from that. And so I think that's so important. I also believe that having been through trauma, you and healed, healed or healing, because, it's not like there's an
Mhm.
end point. You still walk with your trauma.
Yeah.
Um, that you have compassion and you have understanding of what it is like to go through trauma. And every person is different and unique, and their experience is different and unique. But it's also understanding that there's the whole somatic way that you experience something. There's the mind
Mhm.
experiencing it, creating a narrative story. There's the body, there's the breath, all of this. And which is why it's so important to bring a somatic approach.
Yeah.
And that is it. And I think, I remember at one point I was working with a client who had, yeah, horrific childhood abuse, sexual assault, and still at a point where for her talking therapy was super challenging. So, talking to the event wasn't, you know,
Mhm.
where she was at. And she wasn't held in her trauma post that happening. So
Mm.
a huge thing for her was she needed to feel held and needed a hug,
Wow.
right? And she just needed to be held, and so this hug, and so that she could actually release the pain and all of the tears and all of this emotion that had been built up for so long, to be held in that. And so this was something that she asked if I would sit next to her and put my arm around her and just let her cry.
Yeah.
And this was huge. And I was like, oh, I don't remember psychologists doing this. And I know it's not a done thing in
Mhm.
the traditional, health system. However, this is with consent. I'm all about consent. She's asking for this. This does
Mhm.
feel right now. And this is what she needs. And she's asking for this, which is huge. For her to be able to request something was huge, because she hadn't been able to. And so, I did, and it was so therapeutic for her. It was such a release. And it wasn't just that once, because it doesn't just release in one session. There's a lot of this built up trauma.
Mhm.
Um and then, you know, along my training, when I've worked with Gabor Mate, and I've seen him with people who have challenges with addiction, and he'll go up to these people in the street and give them a hug, and I was
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
I love this. He's being a human with
Yeah.
another human. And it was this real connection. And because we grow in connection, and we also heal
Mm.
connection. So we
Yeah.
need to feel safe in that connection to heal. And this was where I went, okay, you know, if Gabor Mate can give his clients um a hug and hold that space,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I knew I was doing the right thing. And I think, that is the difference, I think, with some different trainings, different modalities, different ways of being. And saying that everything is with consent, and I'm very, very trauma informed around my practice. So, uh, yeah, but it's doing things differently.
Mm.
And like I say, connection. It is so important, that connection, that container that you create with your client, so
Yeah.
they feel safe to release,
Yeah.
which allows the healing and the transformation and the growth.
And I think when you were saying that, I was thinking, wow, what a safety container you created for that client feel like she could ask, and to do that and to be held. And I'm thinking, her scope of being touched or held is probably unsafe, completely unsafe, right? And to be able to do that with you, I think it speaks volumes about the connection that you had with her, and the skill in helping her through that, right? And I think it's that sometimes people don't know. They don't even have the words to say to it, right? They can feel it, but they don't actually know how to say it. So I think the somatic practice and the holistic, all of it, as you've explained, is so, so powerful. And so I just wonder, what's one truth that you want every woman listening to remember about her own power to rebuild no matter where she's starting from?
That you are enough.
Mm,
Mm. You know, so much of, everything that we work through, whether we're dealing with anxiety, depression, grief, the trauma, all of these different things, the different narratives, the people pleasing, the guilt, all of these things, when we work through it all, and then it comes down to the sense of someone not feeling enough.
mm,
And so if we're not feeling enough, we're not going to ask for help. We're not going to create a boundary, healthy boundary. We're not going to say no. So just knowing that you are enough, and you are enough in your pain, you are enough at your lowest point, you are enough every day,
hmm.
and where you are is where you are, and just
Yeah.
accepting that. And so yes, you can grow and heal and do this work and all of that. But it's this innate knowing that you are enough and that you deserve support. You deserve to be seen and uh to feel and experience love.
Mm, mm. I think that's beautifully summed up. You're enough. You deserve to be loved. Um, I just want to say thank you so much for having spoken with me today, Lisa. Your story is incredibly empowering, like I say, in terms of taking your own power back. There's huge courage and bravery in sharing, and I know the power in women who are in, the same situation as you've been in, or, a place of non-possibility or non-hope. Hearing your story is going to be of huge benefit, and I'm deeply honored that you were able to share it with us today. Um, Now, importantly, where, if somebody wants to find you or do some work with you, I'll share your details below, but is there anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. One central point is my website. So that is
Mm,
lisatregenza.com. And then, there's the work, there's the coaching, there's the programs. And one thing that I just absolutely love, and it's just my passion project now, is running retreats.
yeah.
And that is such a beautiful thing to do for women to, have time to recharge, to
Mhm.
reconnect to their soul purpose,
Yeah.
to really just realign. Sometimes we get so busy. And so,
Mm.
if anyone's feeling the calling for that, then do reach out.
We'll share all of that information in the show notes. Thank you so, so much, Lisa.
Pleasure. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much. That really, I loved it. Love sharing with you.
Thank you for listening to Stepping Off the Path. If Lisa's story resonated with you, please share this episode with someone who might need it. And if you're in that in-between place, exhausted, unsure how to move forward, this podcast is here to remind you there is always a next step and you don't have to take it alone. Make sure you follow the show so you never miss an episode. See you next time.